Hey, welcome to Talking Church. Glad that you could join us again today. And we're going to have an exciting day today talking about what it's like to be a missionary in a far off place. Now, I'm joined today by some very, very special guests, and it's a unique moment to have them all together in the United Kingdom. And these are guys from Family Church who are missionaries in different parts of the world. And obviously their wives are missionaries with them and their families as well. But we've just snatched the guys today just for this moment because I wanted to take today to give some insight concerning what's it like to be a missionary in a far off place. Because people can have different fairy tale ideas, they can have different imaginations of what it's like. So I thought we'll dig in today to get some real truth on this. So I'm joined today, let's go this way, with Joe. Yep. And Joe and Lily are in Zambia, and I'll let you open up that a little bit more when we go around in a minute. We've got David, who's married to Fiona, they're in Angola, and Ray, who's married to Sarah, who's in the Philippines. And so let's just lay a platform today. We know that the Great Commission to us all is that we go. So when we refer to us being missionaries, or these gentlemen being missionaries, that's true in one aspect, but it's not in all aspects, because every believer is called to be a missionary. Now, if we believe in the Great Commission, where all are called to go, and we believe what Jesus taught, where he said that first Jerusalem, then Judea, Samaria, then to the ends of the earth, what we're going to be spending some time on today is talking about what it's like going for Jesus to the ends of the earth. Yeah. But equally, we've got to understand that the local world that Jesus has put us in is our mission field too. That's right. I think that's important, and I know the hearts of these gentlemen. They're not going to say missions is when you go to a far off place. They're going to very much say, no, missions is our lifestyle, right? Yeah. But these guys have dared with their family to go to far off places. So I'm really excited to hear what that's like day to day living. But I want to open up with this verse from Romans 10. And it's a very, very significant verse when we talk about going for the Lord. It carries on and it makes this announcement in verse 13 of Romans 10. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Great statement. But then it opens it up and Paul begins to teach, but how can they call on the one they've not believed in? How can they believe in one they've not heard about? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can they preach unless they're sent? And so it's almost like the Apostle Paul's breaking this down into a process. People are saved when they hear, but how do they hear unless somebody's speaking? How does someone speak unless they're sent? So the church for 2,000 years has been sending people not just to their Jerusalems, their local world, Judea, Samaria, further afield, but the church for 2,000 years has been sending people to the ends of the earth to tell people about the good news of the gospel of the kingdom, that there's a king that's now the King of Kings and a kingdom that's present for all to come in. But also we know that even when we read about Paul, there's often practical aspects to missions. But if we just turn up and let God use our mouth, that's effective. But I know that God also uses our hands. That sometimes missions can be very practical. And we always want to be sending and supporting missionaries that don't just want to go and do meetings, but want to dig into the culture that they've stepped into, to let the people see that Jesus cares for them, not just about when they go to heaven, but also their life here on earth. So that's our platform today. Paul said, how will people hear so that they can become saved if people aren't sent to share the good news of the gospel? Now, you guys have responded to this Great Commission, not just in your Jerusalems. I know all of you. I know that the lives that you were in before you went to the ends of the earth, you weren't denying Jesus, you were loving Jesus in those worlds, but something motivated you. God sent you to go to the ends of the earth. I want to dig into the why. Let's hear a little bit about the places that you've gone to and you serve in now. Joe, tell us about where you are and what that's like.
Yeah, so it's been 13 years now since I've been traveling to Zambia and really felt the call to missions there. And I was actually just realizing it's almost 12 years ago that Family Church sent a team of young people out to Zambia, and all 3 of our wives were actually on that trip before there were any of our wives.
Wow.
That'll be coming up in April, 12 years ago. And it's been wild just to see how my heart has really grown for the people in Zambia. And I mean, since going to Zambia, I've been to 13 countries in Africa, traveling through and ministering. And it's just something
Because Zambia is very much a base for you, isn't it?
It is. So Zambia is surrounded by 9 countries in Africa. So it's a really central headquarters. So it's where Overland Missions has established their kind of world headquarters there. And it's been awesome to see the work go out into all the surrounding countries that we're surrounded by.
Now again, for those watching, Overland Missions, that's a wonderful couple and ministry that we partner with, that we've known for years. That's Phil and Sharon Smethurst. And Sharon was actually our worship leader when we started church. Yeah. And so we've had friendship, and they run a ministry called Overland Missions, because both Joe and David work alongside Overland as well as Family Church. So just, if someone's watching, I thought, let me fill in the gaps. Carry on, Joe.
Yeah, so we've been able to be a part of that central base, and my wife and I, our roles have changed over the years, from leading the evangelistic teams to drilling wells, to organizing logistics for teams coming in, and partnering with folks, our team in Angola and the surrounding countries there, from our main headquarters.
Of all the countries in the world, Joe, why that region of Africa?
So I had never, nobody else in my family has a passport to this day. So it was really when Pastor Vaughn kicked me out of the church and said, go to Zambia. And I've often thought, people said, oh, like, where else have you been? Have you felt called anywhere else? I say, well, really, Zambia is the first place I went, and I just felt such a calling there. So maybe why Zambia is because it was the first place I went and really got out of my comfort zone. But I really just feel like it's a home. I've never felt more welcomed by a people. And now even all the other places.
That's a good enough why. Yeah. It really is. Okay, David, tell us a little bit about where you are with your family, and I'll ask you the same question about why there afterwards.
So we live in Namibe, Angola, which is the southwesternmost port city in Angola. It's a unique place in that it's where the desert meets the sea. It's a bit of a moonscape, not a lot of vegetation, very unique and beautiful in its own right. But we are there primarily because in the beginning, it wasn't like a God thing. Phil often describes it as a good thing. This isn't a God idea, it's a good idea. And we'll just see if it fleshes out and turns out to be God's idea, which it has. But there's a rural people group, a tribe about 300,000 called the Mukubal. They're completely unreached. And when we say unreached, oftentimes that word is used to describe somebody who...
Very liberally.
Yeah, it's almost too much so. I could count on one hand in the 5 years that we've been mentioning, there are people who have heard the name of Jesus. And we're talking 300,000 people. There's no written language, so therefore there's no Bible in their language. And when you ask them who God is, they just look at you blankly. The word for God is huku. Who's huku to you? And they just kind of, you tell me. They were looking for you to respond. So they're very, very remote, very unreached, and very aggressive. But the amazing thing is that God has prepared them for this time, and they received us. And certain events came into motion where their hearts were open because of our response to them in crises. Yeah. And the head chiefs, the head village chiefs everywhere have opened up to us.
It's amazing how sometimes crisis, we can look at it as a negative thing, but God will use it to show that we're there and we care. Why there, David? Why Angola?
Angola was where everything started for Overland Missions. When Phil fought in the war, he was in Angola, and nobody had been there since he left sometime in I think it was early 90s. Myself and one of our missionary colleagues, Dan Hoyme, did a recon trip there back in 2007, and we were the first ones to bring the gospel since Phil left the war back in the
And it just grabbed your heart?
Yeah, we'd seen that anywhere we had traveled, they had everything. I mean, I say everything. They had war, they had famine, they had hunger, they had disease, they had all kinds of pornographies and incestuous things going on in the families. It was a broken country from the infrastructure to the family unit. It was just devastated. And the gospel was nowhere to be seen.
And
So
that's what grabbed your
yeah,
heart.
like, I want to go where I'm needed,
Yeah.
not where I'm not needed. In
I like
Zambia,
that.
we had a fantastic
Yeah.
team. I was no longer needed there.
So need was very much the call.
100%.
Okay.
I want to be where I'm needed.
Now, Ray, you're in a different part. These guys are over in Africa a bit there. You're more
Yeah.
towards Asia. Well, not towards, in Asia, in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And how long ago was it you went there?
We started traveling there in 2006,
Yeah.
but we moved there in the beginning of 2017.
2017.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about where you're located there.
So we're located in central Manila, which is the main capital of the Philippines. But we're actually in it's like, I would compare Manila to Hampshire. In Hampshire, you've got many different cities. Manila is like that, and it's got many different cities within it. So we were originally in Makati, and now we are in a city called Taguig, which is just like a neighboring city to that.
And it's amazing because sometimes when we talk about missionaries, people think, oh, it has to be dusty streets. No, it doesn't. That's fairy tale thinking. But where Ray is, it's a lot of concrete and a lot of cement.
Yep.
But the need is still very real
Oh, yeah.
in people's non-understanding of the gospel. Why the Philippines, Ray?
Well, I first travelled with you in 2006. That was the first time I went, and I was violently ill. It's like, I thought I'd never go back. But I did. And when we kept going back, and we kept seeing God touch people's lives, and we kept seeing, how responsive Filipinos were to the gospel. And we just were drawn by that. And then in the end, we just felt, okay, we could do more there where we lived there than we could if we were just visiting every 2 weeks.
So it was really a heart for the people.
Yeah, it was a heart for the people, it was a heart for the nation, because again, the nation is just a broken nation. It's broken with corruption, it's broken with immorality, it's broken because it's been abused by so many surrounding nations. And it's now beginning to find its own identity as a nation.
And again, with the Philippines, though you're located now in a more rural area, not in a rural area, more of a city area, you haven't got to drive very long to be in 7,000 islands.
No.
That are more provincial, they're more rural, and I've always enjoyed going to those areas. So
Yeah.
you're still involved in the going out to the rural areas, though the majority of your work at the moment is in the city areas, right?
Yeah, I mean, we got to a point where we were traveling out a lot, but what God was putting on our hearts was actually to reproduce ourselves, so we could actually enable and equip people to go and do what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we acknowledged that was a need, because we couldn't do everything on our own. We still have very good relationships with the guys in the dump site, so we always like to go down there and we get them up to where we are as well, and they're actually helping us with worship at the moment.
So you're
as well.
supporting those relationships as well?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
I want to dig in now to a little bit, because I know I'm trying to think of questions that people may have. And one question that I know some people would have is, what do you do? You know what I mean? You know, it's like some people think pastors work on Sunday and wonder, they do. I know they're out there. And when it comes to missionaries, I know some people would be going like, all right, you'd like us to back you up in prayer, support. What do you do? So, Joe, what does missions look like for you in what you do in a normal week? Not that there is ever a normal week, but just a grasp of
It's
it.
one of my favorite questions is, what's your day-to-day routine like?
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I wish I had a day-to-day routine, because every day is so different. And the amount of calls we've gotten on, I broke down, or I hit a cow, or the engine blew on the truck, and you don't
That
realize,
happens
like,
in Portsmouth all
Oh
the
yeah,
time.
but here, here, fortunately, you break down. I mean, we broke down once here in Portsmouth, and it was like, I can't believe we waited 2 hours. Like, it was unbelievable. 2 hours,
terrible.
is ridiculous. I've been on a couple of recoveries that have taken 5 days, 3 days, 4 days, and it's like, hey babe, I'm leaving. I got to go sort out this truck, and I might see you in a couple nights, or 5 days from now, or a week. And so it's the day-to-day routine, I think, doesn't exist.
Because it's mobilising also the whole ministry, isn't it? You've
Yeah.
got trucks going every direction, and they take a beating, right?
And anybody that knows Phil, knows he'll be like, hey, tomorrow we're going to go to Zambezi, and we're going to be gone for 9 days, and we're going to do construction, or we're going to minister, we're going to set up the tent and have a conference, and so there's never really a routine. There are certain things that we do on a day-to-day basis. My role now is overseeing a lot of the logistics and construction at Rapid 14, but even that, I think one day I was in town just getting supplies, and I'm standing on this loading dock as we're getting ready to load some cement, and this door opens up, and this whole crowd of people just starts filing past me, and I'm like, well, this is strange, because I didn't know there was this tiny little room. Must have been like 50 people packed into this room. And they all like kind of surround me, and they all jump off this loading dock, and they line up in formation, and they face me. And I turn around, and there's no one else on this loading dock. I'm like, well, this is weird. I was like, well, I'm glad you gathered here together today, and just kind of honestly joking around. And they're like, yeah, preach. And I'm like, well, okay. So I mean, talk about being put on the spot. I'm like, I should have thought of this through before I said, thanks for gathering here. And so I just shared a real quick, message of the love of Jesus. And I turned around and realized, oh, these guys' bosses are standing behind me. And I realized in that moment that they're all security guards that work in different shops and businesses around the local city. And so I turned around like, oh, sorry, I don't want to detract from your meeting here. And they said, no, you started. Go ahead and say a prayer for all of them for
Wow.
safety. And so I prayed over all these guys, men and women, and said, thanks for letting me share. Have a nice day. And since then, I've run into a number of these people throughout the city as we've been around. They're like, I walked into a shop one day. Of course, I didn't recognize them. And the guy's like, security guard's like, hi. I was like, hello, how are you?
So it's good, it's good to have a security guard on your side.
Yeah, for sure.
It really
and
is.
it's come in
So
handy.
With this, again, people are watching, they're thinking, so a missionary to a far-off country just gets up, opens his Bibles and preach, where really, yeah, that's a part of what you do.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of logistical, well digging. You do a whole manner of things, showing the love of God, not just in word, but also very much in action.
Yeah.
I just want to break this fairy tale that you guys are just sitting there praying, reading the Bible, teaching the Bible. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of manual going, doing as well, right?
I would say a lot of my time was spent in offices, customs offices, police offices, Interpol. And I've developed some real amazing relationships in these offices that have been, it's really just another day in the office for me.
Yeah.
But it's turned into, I have amazing connections now with the head chaplain at the police station, just because I'm there so much. And he started asking, what do you do? Why are you here? And was able to share with him what we do at Overland Missions. And he's since come to our conferences and gotten plugged in with us. So it's just, every day is a
Okay.
unique experience.
What about Angola? What if it was a normal day or a day that you would say would give a good picture to people watching about what missionary life in Angola is like? What would a day look like?
I feel like normal is there's the idea, that image picture you have, but it's probably a bit more like church life. It's 90-20, 90% logistics, preparation during the week for Sunday. And so being with Overland Missions, everyone thinks you guys are always in the bush. And I feel like we do have two lives. We have our city life and we have our bush life. But the main thing is wherever we're going, we're available to minister the gospel in the moment, because we're missionaries, not in the bush, but wherever
You are. Yeah.
It's like we're ambassadors for Christ now.
So you're not gearing up. Hey, in 3 weeks we're gonna be doing missions. Life is missions.
Yeah,
Love that.
It's not like I'm preparing my messages to preach. Okay, we're gonna be in this village. We're gonna preach this and this and this. It's like we are the message.
What does some of the practical look like, David, that would you be involved in?
Practical is everything from making sure your vehicles are sorted to getting stuff to the villages. A lot of times out there's no running water. You can run down on food. There's a big drought that hit one of the worst in 20 years. And so a lot of our key disciples, they had nothing to eat, and the government wasn't bringing stuff in. So we would bring in our own food. We can't feed everyone, but we can take care of those who are taking the gospel out further and farther than we're going. And so we'll bring that out. Just anything we can do to help the people out where they're at.
And then when it's mission time, though we're always on mission time, but there's a going, like you're going with a team, that's when it all changes and everything you've been preparing kicks in.
Yeah, and we go out every week, every other week for anywhere from 3 to 5 days at a time. So that, it's...
Would that be to new
craziness.
areas, finding new places, as well as sustaining the other ones?
Sometimes. We want to make disciples, and that requires consistency. Going
I like
back,
that. So you're not just going there one shot, one night only, give your life to Jesus. You're also doing what the Bible says, which is go make disciples.
And the only way you can do that is with consistency.
That's
Jesus
it.
broke bread. He lived with them, walked with them, talked with them, and they saw how he lived his life so they could follow and duplicate that. We can't expect these guys to follow Jesus if they don't see how we do our lives with family, in the good, in the bad, suffering through devastating illnesses and all that kind of stuff. If they don't see that stuff as a regular part of our lives and still have faith in Jesus,
Yeah.
when those things happen to them, and they do, they're going to go to the witch doctor because they've never seen it modeled. They've just heard it taught.
Yeah, yeah. And sadly, a lot of missions over the years has just been talk, isn't it? It's been people going on like a 2-week holiday, turning up, and the people saying, do you know what my life is like? You know. Okay, Ray, obviously we're planting a new church there. Family Church planting a new church there in Tageek. We've got the other missions that we go on. We've got mission teams going over. But what would a day in the life look like for you and Sarah?
We are very aware that where we are, no one knows who Family Church is. So we don't have a reputation, we don't have a brand, we don't have a, lights or a big sign saying who we are. It is me and Sarah. So when we say we are Family Church, they look at me and Sarah. So we have to purposely build relationships that lead people to Christ, showing them who Family Church is and growing who Family Church is. So day to day, we're constantly building relationships, whether it's where we're meeting someone new or meeting someone that we've known for a while, where we're constantly interacting with people throughout our community so we can develop that relationship and lead them to the Lord. And then ultimately that then then results in them coming to being a part of the church.
So what you would say is it's very much just about networking, relationships, new ones, old ones, again, disciple making.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question, because something that's, a great demonstration of faith from you all is you're not single men out there doing it on your own. You were when you started, but now you've got wives and you've got children. All of you got wives and children. So what's it like raising a family on the mission field? Let's start again with you, Joe.
I think everybody's basis of fear is whatever is foreign to them. And I think it's really helped for me being in Zambia so long before I had a family, and now having 2 kids. It's definitely, my fear is actually the unknown. So it's like when we come back here, I'm more worried about my kid running into the street or falling into the bay or something like that. Whereas Zambia, the life in Zambia is
It's
normal
become
for
normal
me.
to you. Yeah.
So people ask me like, oh my gosh, aren't you concerned about the venomous snakes? And I'm like, well, I'm the only one in the ministry that's ever been bit by a venomous snake, so the odds are in my kid's favor. Yeah. And yes, there's wildlife and there's all those kind of things, but it's what I'm used to now, and so it's not what I see as abnormal.
That's a really interesting perspective. So a foreign land to you now is the land that your children haven't known, and it's so you coming back to the UK with all the roads, the traffic, just the way is more worrying, if that's a good word to use, than what's daily life to you.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and even when we go to the States, it's you hear the gun crimes and there's just so much. It's really whatever you're not used to, in my opinion.
That's a really good perspective. David, what's it like raising a family there in Angola?
Fantastic. I love it. I definitely agree with Joe that the thing that most people are concerned about is saying, do your kids love Angola? It's home for them. It is. They know nothing else. And people are oftentimes concerned about, or they're afraid of something happening. Well, what about the medical? What about this? And what about that? And it comes down to what you're accustomed to. And you can say, well, we're accustomed to life in Angola. We don't have medical care. We don't have all these kind of things. And that is a real concern. But I think at the end of it, he's worth it. You can look the challenges in the face and say he's worth it. He's going to take care of us. He's always been good. He always is good. He always will be good. And so regardless of what we come up against or what comes up against us, God's going to be there. He's going to have an answer. And even if we come through it looking a little less pretty than we did coming into it, it's still going to be good.
It's again, it's I don't say this negatively, I say this in a celebration. It's that old style Christianity where people believed that their life was no longer their own, that they were bought with a price, and he's worth it. I love that. Sometimes I think that's the missing ingredient. People don't get that he's worth it, so they don't come to church on time. Ooh, somebody caught that one. But it's everything we do has got to be his worthship. It's got to be, I do this because he's worth it. Yeah. That's a great fueler.
It's that kingdom and the cross. We're in it for the kingdom, and there's glory,
Yeah.
but there's going to be a suffering and we got to embrace, because he embraced it. He paid the price, and we've also got to pay the price and not lose faith. There's grit and tenacity that comes with walking with Jesus. He did it. We can do it.
Yeah. It's like when Paul says, he wants to know the power of a cross, of resurrection, and the sufferings.
Yeah.
People leave out that bit these days,
not so
the
convenient.
embracing it. Sometimes there's some stuff as well. We'll come back to that in a second. Ray, for you, what's it like raising a family there in the Philippines?
It's hard work. City life is very, very different to bush life. I've been to Zambia and I've stayed on the base there. City life is chaotic constantly. When we first stayed there, for the first 15 months, Isaac was a kidnap risk because there was so much kidnapping in the area and in the poorer areas of the Philippines, like where we were staying, and where he was like the only white kid in the area. He was a big kidnapping risk, so we had to watch him like a hawk constantly. He couldn't play out with other kids. He couldn't leave the house without, there was never that opportunity for him. We had to be very, very careful. Now it's slightly different where we've changed location. It's not so much of a problem. However, we still get earthquakes. We got evacuated, for the first time out of our building because there was a big earthquake. And you just take that in your stride. I think God, whatever we go through, right? God always gives you the grace to deal with.
That's when you've got to know that you're called, right?
Yeah.
Some are sent and some went.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're sent, and you rely in the call and the church that's behind you, the bigger thing of ministry, that you didn't just have a good idea one day and go. There was a sending to it. Brilliant. Let me dig into something that you highlighted a little bit there, David, because when people again think of missions, many young Christians, old Christians, if they've never been on a mission trip, can have these fairy tale illusions of just holding babies that are suffering, and there's joyful bits to what you do. Bringing relief to anyone is a joyful thing, but also you have to balance the ideals and the realities. That being a missionary in a far off place, there's bits that are great and there's bits that are not so great. Joe, what's something that's great and something that's not so great?
Well, I think I just enjoy the culture there is very, very family oriented. It's more you know your neighbors. There's a community atmosphere that's just so inviting, and I feel like the not so great thing would be probably it's almost sense of, well, that's not my job. That seems to stem right from the roots in the government. If I'll say that live, but it's really like there's currently 16-hour power cuts every day because they're not producing enough electricity because 10 years ago there wasn't a plan put in place to accommodate for drought or anything like that. And so I think it's very frustrating. There's been a number of times we go to town to get stuff done, to get supplies, to go to offices, and you find either power's out or it's an unexpected 4-day weekend, or so I think
and you'd put that down to people not taking responsibility.
To some of it. I mean, some of it's just a lack of me looking up what holidays on a Tuesday, and some of it is someone didn't order the paper that they needed to print your forms on that day, and like, oh no, we've been out of the paper for 3 weeks.
And that can be a week or two wait.
It was 2 years before they actually had the books that we needed for our visas. They were like, oh no, we haven't printed them for 2 years. It was like waiting, like, okay, well, like, what do we do? Well, you just have to come back in every 30 days to get another stamp. Like, well, I wouldn't have to do that if you had the book, so can't you just make a temporary piece of paper that I use as a book? And it's just not like that. There's just some certain things that slip under the radar, and the structure is very lax, but at the same time, everybody's friendly and happy about it.
So you get we get the friendly community with the negligence of, all right, it's the balance, all right? How about yourself? Something that's a joy, something that makes your heart glad, something that frustrates you, annoys you?
I really enjoy the Angolan culture. Again, the family, I think African culture as a whole has a higher value for family, for good or ill. They just take care of each other. And that's really, it's nice. And to see how the children honor their parents and work and do things for the family, that's also really cool. And it's been neat to see our kids get involved in that and adopt that into a bit of our own family culture. What drives me nuts is that things just don't work. A South African friend of ours traveled to the States and to the UK, and when asked upon return what it was like, she said, everything worked. It's like the motorways function, the lights work, everything works. And so there, I mean, 1 month we went without power for 9 days, and it was very normal. Or if you had power, you didn't have fuel at the pumps. So either you can have refrigeration or you can drive your car. And that's very normal. Also the government offices, things, it just...
And it's a length of time, isn't it? I've been involved in Philippines and Africa when it's like, yeah, that'll happen tomorrow, but tomorrow could be weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I got on a motorway Saturday that was closed, and I was like, oh, idiots, this is going to take forever, you know, and it was like 2 days, you know, and it's fixed, you know, but in Africa, that could be...
7 years. We've
We've
seen roads derelict for 7 years.
And the interesting is that 2 days, let's say if you've got to get to a hospital, I got to get to a hospital, you go to another hospital. In Africa, you're not going to get to another hospital. It's like, okay, what are we going to do?
And that's when you have to turn, hit your knees, and find God in that, right?
Yeah. I started to I had started to go septic from an infection years ago, and I started antibiotics. 2 days in, oh no, there's no more of that antibiotic in the country. So I have to switch antibiotics, then I started to have a flare-up again. It's just change pace and
roll with
keep
it.
going. Yeah.
And you end up with a Disprin or an Anadin.
I still have all my appendages, which is a miracle, actually. Praise the Lord.
Ray, something that's a joy, something that's a non-joy.
I would always say the immigration process is not always fun.
What's the joy first?
The joy. I was just relating to these guys. The joy is seeing why you're there worth it.
Okay.
So, like the cost that we will pay and everything, and the reason why we're there, and the hardships that we go through. The joy is when you see someone give their life to the Lord. When you see your son or children making friends, and you see that relationship develop, and you see you get to see that interaction between your life and somebody else's life, and that interaction is causing them to begin to interact with God. That is the biggest joy.
And your non-joy?
Non-joy is
that a new word, non-joy?
Non-joy.
Sounds almost Asian.
Like
non-joy.
We could do.
Non-joy.
But the immigration process is always fun. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't want to say too much on life, but I mean, you go for a visa application and you pass it into a desk here, and it takes what, 3 days to get to there. You know, everything's just slow, and then like that's if you pay them. If you don't pay them, you've got to wait weeks for it to go from here to there, you know, and it's just that process. It's just nothing works quickly.
All right. Hey, it's time for a funny story. I know it can be tough, but changing cultures, you must have one or two.
Yes.
Give us a funny story.
All right. Oftentimes, people will take something from their home culture to a foreign culture and think that it crosses over, and we're really bad about this in the church. I was leading a team in Western Province. Joe, you were with us. This is that one that was on the border. We were supposed to go to Angola, didn't go. There was this pastor from St. Petersburg, Florida, big muscly guy. He actually made it into Angola with me. But I remember we're praying for this elderly lady, and she doesn't speak any English. And so he goes like this, like, give me your hands. He goes like this. She looks at him strange and then lifts up her shirt.
That's awkward.
And she like grabs her boobs and his eyes are as big as saucers. Like,
so hey, he never did that again.
oh no,
Never did.
no.
That's brilliant.
Hand on shoulder, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Joe?
funny.
I think one of my first trips out early on, I was...
The guys loved that story over here. They loved that story. Go on, sorry, Joe.
We were staying in the bush, we were camping, ministering to these people, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go use the loo. So I take the shovel and the roll of toilet paper and I hike out into the bush. And as I'm hiking back across the road, the road, it's the sand trail, and we're the only ones out there. I see a car coming. I was like, oh, that must be Dan. We were expecting him to come out. And so I stand in the middle of the road with my shovel and roll of loo paper. and start waving. And the vehicle stops, and I realize it's not Dan. It's actually a government official vehicle. And I'm like, oh man, now I've just flagged down a vehicle in the middle of the bush. So they call me over like, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, I just waved them down with loo paper. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like,
a poo. I'm having a poo.
I mean, come on, shovel and a roll of loo paper. You can put two and two together. And so I was like, finally managed to get the words together. Like, are you okay? What's happening? Are you all right? What are you doing? And so I finally managed to say, oh, we're actually out here. We're camping. We're ministering the gospel. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. Here's my card. Get in touch. We'd love to help you get connected. It's great to see you guys doing a workout here. So it ended up being a God encounter.
Yeah.
Not
it's amazing what God can use.
Most of my God encounters.
Amazing. Yeah, I wonder why you go around with a shovel and toilet paper.
I noticed
Sunday. I thought, what's he doing there? And I can understand.
Gets people asking questions.
Well, you got a funny story for us, Ray?
Yeah, most of them involve being stitched up by you.
Me?
But I remember when we were doing our building project in Tiglawigan, which is one of the provinces out, and we were obviously having all the food and having the local food that's being prepared every day. So if you want to lose weight quickly, that's how you do it. But we were there, and then Pastor Rick comes in and sits with me, and he's eating, and he looks at me and he goes, "How are you doing this?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He went, "This is bad." so even for a Filipino to then say the food is bad, it's not good. But one day because we're so used to them lighting the fire and cooking all the food and everything, and so one day the fire's not lit, but I see these guys gutting these little fish, descaling them and throwing them into a bowl. And I went, "So how are we cooking these today then?" And he went, "We're not." I said, "What?" He said, "We're not. All I saw was a bowl of salad and these raw fish." And so I said, so he picks one up and goes, "Hom, we're not." My stomach hated me that day. It really did. So that was my lunch, raw fish and salad. And that was just a really gross sort of moment where you have to completely disconnect your mind from your stomach. And yeah.
And there's a few of those moments when I've had a fair few of those moments. And when I was traveling on my own doing missions, it was always me that had to do it. But then Ray started coming with me. So he became my designated. Yeah. I remember at one time somebody came and said we'd help somebody open a turkey farm. And they'd kept this one turkey, and they wanted to honour us with it. And they came and said, "We want you to come and slaughter the turkey, cut its throat, catch it, cut its throat." I said, "Love to, but I'm raising young men now. Ray's coming." And so remember that one, the turkey and stuff like that. And so that was his first encounter of slaughtering the turkey. And we had a few of those moments, haven't we?
We've had a few of those moments.
In the Lord Mayor's office.
In the Mayor's office, in the
where they brought us something to eat. And I actually enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was
but
disgusting.
I knew Ray didn't. So I said, "Ray loves these." And I just kept pushing them over because it's all a part of the training, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Funny. So what's one of the scariest moments you've had?
Without getting into too many details, we had a number of years ago an encounter with some armed thieves, and I would say that's probably definitely one of the scariest moments for me was to have sort of an invasion at night and to not know, how it's going to turn out. And had another encounter a couple years ago as well with some armed bandits on the road at night. Just me and Lily, she was pregnant at the time, and we came upon an ambush. Guy had just been dragged out of his truck and shot, and another guy, his brother had fled the scene and was like begging us for help. Unfortunately, we were able to get help for them, and the guy survived. But yeah, in those moments, I think is.
Now, this is important because somebody might be watching and they might say, "I want some funny stories." Oh, there are funny stories, but there's some really real moments, life and death moments. You guys have chosen to trust God with your lives in an environment that's not normal. But trust isn't a nice word in your dictionary. It's something you daily need, right?
Yeah.
Scary moment, David.
Before I had kids, surfing in a hurricane in Florida. But now that I have kids, seeing my second, Ivy, nearly die of typhoid fever. I was in Namibia trying to sell our vehicle so we could buy a new one, and she had been sick for a week. You give your kids ibuprofen or Tylenol or something just to keep the fevers down, and usually it passes, like a virus. And it hadn't passed, and I was out of country. Fee didn't have a vehicle, needed to get to a missionary hospital to get her tested. and we ended up having her medically evacuated from the country by air ambulance into Namibia. And they were saying that it was a life or death situation. Again, one of those situations where you have to rely on Jesus because there's no one else you can rely on.
And when it's us, it's one thing, but when it's our family, it's another thing, isn't it?
It's like your heart's running outside of your chest and you're
Yeah.
trying to chase it down. But
Yeah.
that was the scariest thing.
Ray, scary story?
We had a team come out in 2017, I think it was, or beginning 2018, and we took the team up into the mountains. And obviously, I left Sarah and Isaac at the home. Our home at that point was you get a lot of mosquitoes in the home, and we're in the mountains, and I get one bar of signal on my phone, and it just says, "Ray, we need to talk." And so I'm running around the top of this mountain trying to find signal, and I find out that Isaac got rushed into hospital because he'd been bitten 17 times by a mosquito. 9 of the bites were on his hand, which caused cellulitis, and his swelling was starting to go up his arm, which was close to being in his bloodstream. So he got rushed into hospital, and I'm on top of this mountain. I can't do anything. And I'm just getting this bits of conversation with Sarah over one bar of signal every now and then. You still got to preach and you still got to do that stuff, but that was the scariest moment because I was not able to do anything, and I was nowhere even remotely close to being at home.
It's carrying what you're called to do with some of the stuff that can come against you in the same moment in your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
But none of those things that you've experienced would make you want to stop being a missionary?
Not yet.
No. Do you remember Keith Green?
Yeah.
He wrote a song, "I Pledge My Head to Heaven for the Gospel."
Yeah.
In that song, he talks about pledging his wife, his children, himself
Yeah.
to heaven for the gospel. And I think we have to reach a point in our lives where whether we, or our wives, or our children should go to be with Jesus, is he worth it? Because when he was on the cross, he looked over eternity and said, they are worth it.
Yeah.
And
that's what it comes down to on the mission field, isn't it?
yeah,
You know, not that people can't be harmed for what they're doing in a more Western world. We know that that's true. And the news also revealed that very, very sad instance in Nigeria where the pastor was beheaded, but his confidence in Christ and the statements he made before have touched the heart of many, many people. But he said to his wife and family, it's all right.
yeah,
And there was an underriding confidence that this isn't just a story we tell. Jesus is real.
yeah,
And if it turns out that we're going to meet him at different times, we'll do that for the gospel.
Yeah.
Come on, this is what it's about. We've got to realise that missions isn't some fairy tale, get away, get myself a 2-week experience, though often it is for some. It's a place that you're saying, like the Moravians of old, when the Moravians left the shore to reach the people there, they waved goodbye, knowing that most of them wouldn't see their families again. You know, now, thank the Lord for airplanes and all that kind of stuff. But missions isn't something that's new in the 21st century. From day one, when Jesus said, go, people have been going, leaving things, spending their lives, laying aside a nice pensioned life, a good job opportunity, 2 kids in a house, for something that God had touched their heart with, which is always that something is people. Okay, a stepping stone, maybe people are watching this going, you know what, I think the Lord could be stirring my heart to do missionary lifestyle somewhere. Obviously a good stepping stone for that would to go on a mission trip.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people want to jump from A to Z and, you know, going via B, D, E isn't a bad thing, right?
Yeah. And you can meet your spouse.
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's true. They're all family church ladies as well. I just want to say that you know, they're all family church, you know, good family church ladies. And in some ways, it would be brilliant to do this with the ladies, wouldn't it? And ask their perspective of what missions is like, you know. Okay, why should someone go on a mission trip, a short-term mission trip, Joe?
Well, for me, it was really, I had never been out of my comfort zone, and it was just the moment that gripped my heart and made me realize that the things that bother me in the day-to-day are first world problems, and to realize that there's a whole other world out there where people are truly struggling with the day-to-day and are struggling with a lack of knowledge of the message of the gospel,
Okay.
and the hope that Jesus brings.
And again, that's back to what Paul says in Romans, how will they know
Yeah.
unless somebody's sent and starts to speak to them, you know?
Yeah.
Why should somebody go on a short-term mission, David?
Short-term mission trip away from home really enables a person to see what God is doing outside of the four walls of what they've grown up in, outside of their box. And oftentimes gives them the confidence to start being used by God in ways they never thought were possible.
Very good. Ray?
I'd say that, when you leave your country and you go on a mission trip, you see that the kingdom of God is bigger than your country, or you're bigger than your church. And I think whether we grew up in church or not, our church becomes our world, it becomes our bubble. And we need to see that the kingdom of God is bigger than that. And so we begin to think bigger and think kingdom more than we think American or English or wherever.
Kingdom thoughts, which is great. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and if you've never been on a mission trip, maybe that's something you want to consider doing. And always send us an email to any of his guys, and we'll forward that email to them. If I put all your details up, we'd get lost in details. But if you've got a question or you'd like to connect with Joe and Lily or David Fee or Ray and Sarah in what they're doing in the mission field, contact us. Somebody give me an address for Family Church. Info mail@family.church. There we go, and we'll certainly pass that on to them. Hope you've enjoyed today, hope you've been inspired. Let's be praying for those who are on the mission field. Let's not just forget they're there. One of the saddest things I think with missions is an old statement that goes, out of sight, out of mind. And now you guys must have experienced that. But suddenly when the people aren't in your daily world anymore, you don't stop loving them, you just don't think of them. Let's try not to do that. Let's try to, in our hearts, remember those who are on the mission field, the ones we know and the ones we don't. Because we're called to our Jerusalem, our Judea, Samaria, and we also want to be partnering with those who are called to the ends of the earth. Right. See you next week, same time, for Talking Church. God bless.